So now I will give the floor to Ida Jooste, who is the Global Health Media Advisor, Internews, to take the floor. Ida?
Thank you so much.
Your
Thank you,
turn.
Dr. Briand. Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the globe. I'm Ida Jooste from Internews, as Dr. Briand has said. Over 2 Wednesday slots, those of us in the media track really did some soul searching and asked those questions that journalists like to ask: the who, the what, the where, the how, and the why of the infodemic. Exactly why was this such an overwhelming problem? We did some solid thinking also towards solutions, and how we structured this is over 2 Wednesdays. We first looked at challenges and then we looked at solutions. In both of those slots over the 2 Wednesdays, we also had breakout cafes, which we called a repair cafe, to repair what it is that had gone so horribly wrong. And then to also a week later look at how do we prepare? How do we in fact already look ahead to infodemic preparedness, which we fully acknowledged might come around the next time a pathogen hits the world. So we wanted to be fully prepared for what might well happen, because we also acknowledged that infodemics or misinformation has been part of challenging and hard to follow health information even before COVID-19. In session 2, in the panel discussion session, my colleague Genevieve Hutchinson from BBC Media Action will tell you about session 2, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about session 1 now. I wanted to also say that in both of the panel discussions, which preceded the breakout sessions, we had representation from around the globe, various regions. We also had representation from what it is that media is now. It is no longer the printed newspaper, as we know. It is across genres, it's across formats, it includes social media, and very importantly, mainstream media, those well-known big names, those well-known personalities that have reported infodemics and of course epidemics and pandemics before, and also community radio, rural media. So the entire spectrum was represented, which is really exciting because the challenge is truly global and all journalists are very much affected by both the pandemic and the infodemic, as you'll see. So in the next slide, because I wanted to just highlight what was so striking about these discussions. As you know, journalists are storytellers, and we thought we'd let these 3 quotes tell the story of the challenges. You could take a minute or half a minute to just read through those. And I wanted to highlight what P. Sainath said, is that as media, it has given us every nerve, every sinew, every vein, every artery, every vessel and bone on display, and we're looking at what that means for ordinary people. So those sinews and bones, both of the problem of the pandemic and how to report it, but also of the infodemic is what Sainath meant. These quotes really truly encapsulated much of the essence of what came out of the breakout session, these repair cafes that we had after the panel discussion. And so I want to just quickly go through some of the key challenges that were identified in virtually all of the breakout sessions, and which indeed the panelists also spoke about. The science moved fast. It moved incredibly fast, and it was particularly tough for journalists who had not specialized in health reporting before to keep up. It was tough even for health journalists. I mean, the very fact that 10 months later, we have viable vaccine candidates of a pathogen we only came to hear of in late December or early January is fast-moving science. With that is the difficulty of communicating uncertainty in science or evolving insights in science. So again, if one hadn't focused on health reporting before, this would be a new concept. Even those who had focused on health reporting before know it is a challenge to communicate uncertainties in science, to adopt a tentative tone, and also to, just explain to audiences that guidance may change, for example. This was a particular challenge to journalists. Misinformation, the infodemic, whether through misunderstanding, genuine misunderstanding in that the science moved so fast and so much of the information was new, or through malicious intent, which we typically call disinformation, moved even faster than this fast-moving science at times. So we thought it's absolutely essential that we take stock and share the tactics and strategies that developed over time. It wasn't immediately obvious to journalists exactly how they should deal with this. Journalists are also individuals in WhatsApp groups and on Facebook pages whose friends forward them information, in addition to the reporting that they then have to structure around this information that come into their laps, if you like. So it was a chance to own up to this overwhelm and to embrace the lessons learned amidst confusion and despair and even lies, and definitely too little time to verify information or to make sense of that information at times. Because remember, a journalist does not only have to verify information, a key task of really deep meaning-making journalism is to make meaning of information, not just to regurgitate or disseminate information. So a huge problem identified absolutely around the globe is that access to information for media is a problem. This may come as a surprise to some because perhaps we think that journalists know the contact details of those in the know. But this time around, journalists felt that access to trusted sources, very important, and real access, absolutely real access to governments and to government data was a huge challenge. And journalists definitely don't want to just make do or make it up. So access should be a given, and in Solutions we'll give you more about what we thought could be done about it. A lack of transparency from governments is definitely a huge problem, and with that goes political agendas or perceived political agendas and state overreach as a problem, and how to balance providing true science solutions with growing dissatisfaction from citizens, for instance, over lockdown. So kind of reporting this wicked problem, if you like, was a key challenge for journalists. Then individual and social behavior issues, the fact that we're all affected, and people's relationship with social media, as I mentioned before, those quick shares and the looking for likes is a kind of competing track with credible information in a journalist's life, and something that they need to try and balance. So work-life issues, a challenge even to mental health, was sincerely identified as a challenge. It was noted that there are also journalists out there who don't believe that COVID-19 is real. And this, of course, comes about because of the fact that because of this global problem, suddenly all journalists had to cover this very complex issue. And that might have included COVID, to this day may include COVID denialists. They have peers and they have networks to address this problem, but it is a real problem. And then, yeah, I wanted to just say that even while we were focusing on challenges, solutions also started to bubble up from the first session because there's a lot of goodwill. One of them is that journalists said that if they had any background in health and science journalism, it helped tremendously. If they had trusted contacts among scientists and others in the pandemic response, it helped tremendously. And a very big last word from me is a new culture of sharing bubbled up through this pandemic. Journalists are often lone wolves. They're after a scoop, but brainstorming, networks, WhatsApp groups, and other support systems, and a culture of collaboration shaped much of their coverage, which is very encouraging for us.
Thank you, Ida. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to talk very quickly about what was discussed during the second session, so some of the solutions. So during the second session, we had quite a diverse range of participants, and we talked about what the wider public needs from the media sector, and so therefore what the media sector could do more of and what the media sector needs from other parts of society. And this overlaps and complements much of what has been said already today. So in terms of meeting audiences' needs, we agreed that communication cannot be one way, and that this includes media listening to and engaging with communities and giving people space to ask the questions they need to through media. So helping people to feel heard and also helping us as media and wider society to meet one another's needs. We also talked about the fact that, as Ida's mentioned, many people cannot differentiate between facts and disinformation. They don't have the background understanding. And that particularly during lockdowns, media may be one of the very few or only means to engage with people. So we looked at media taking responsibility for helping audiences to have a more detailed understanding of health and scientific information, demystify health and scientific and medical development processes, identify and call out, counter and counter the most prevalent mis and disinformation trends without amplifying. So some of the accountability role that media plays, and help audiences understand infodemics and develop the skills to manage them. We also talked about media using a range of platforms and communication approaches. So different styles and formats. It's not just about news. Some people learn best or prefer information through personal stories, drama or comedy, and they want to see or hear empathy and compassion. And we talked about media being a reliable and trustworthy source of learning across all media platforms, so being transparent about what we know and don't know, and always verifying before broadcasting. So in order to do this, we also talked about the need to collaborate more across the media sector to be able to learn from one another and help one another find solutions, and to be able to build more networks with experts to help break down complex information. We also talked about diversifying networks that media organizations might have already or individuals might have to help to challenge echo chambers, understand where mis and disinformation is coming from, and challenge our own assumptions. We also talked a lot about the need to learn from one another, to learn from past experiences, for example, during the Ebola outbreak in West Africa or around HIV, and to learn from experts. So really building this network between media and NGOs and civil society. Sorry, if we can, oh yes, NGOs and civil society, science and research, and also to support the networking and the engagement with each other, looking for support from the digital and technology sector to help support these networks, and with providing some sort of accessible central resource or collection of resources for updated, verified information from health. And again, really emphasizing that in engagement and communication between country health authorities, between UN agencies and multilaterals and the media, that we're also looking for this two-way communication and collaborating. So not just the press briefings, but access to resources, access to training to help us all get better in how we communicate around the infodemic and the pandemic. And then on our last slide, right at the end of the discussions, we looked at making commitments, both commitments that individuals could make and commitments that the wider society, wider media sector could make. So if you could just go to the last slide for me, please. And again, in the commitments, the commitments really centered around things like what we can do for our audiences, about better collaboration, about taking more responsibility and not adding to the infodemic, as well as about preparing for the next infodemic. So I'm sorry, that's quite a rushed speed through, but just to say that we will be sharing more detailed lessons learned and solutions that have come out of this in the near future, and we will all be continuing to work together to help media meet the communication needs of the wider public. So a huge thank you to WHO and to everyone who's been involved with this conference, to the organisers, and very much to the participants. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ida, Jooste, and Genevieve Hutchinson. I didn't have time to introduce Genevieve, and she's from the BBC Media Action. So thanks a lot, both of you, for this very comprehensive feedback from your sessions. Indeed, you said that it has been tough for media and journalists. This period has been tough, I think, for everybody. And what I really appreciate from you is that you touch upon your challenges, which were making sense of something that is new, complex, fast evolving, being able also to manage the uncertainty in science and make sense about it, and how it was challenging for you to have access to trusted sources of information. So I think this is very important for all of us, because if we are together, we can also flag for you what are the trusted sources of information, and collectively manage this path towards truth and trust. What is also extremely important, what you highlighted, is this new culture of sharing. I think we are facing all a new phenomenon, a new challenges as well, and so it's great if it can develop. We can develop new solutions as well to face this, and a new culture of sharing seems very appealing, in my opinion, as well as you mentioned that the compassion that you are calling for. So more collaboration, two-way communication and dialogue, listening, learning, all these are really important words, I think, and we are really much looking forward to a complete report of your discussion so that we can incorporate this in our future action, but also in the future trainings that we will develop for infodemic managers, and that we can continue this journey together with media and journalists.